Hi, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the most fabulous pickleball podcast on the planet, Absolutely Pickled. Would you like to introduce our fabulous special guest this week?
We do. We have an amazing guest. She jumped out of the water, grew some legs. She used to be a mermaid. Comes from a surfing world, and decided to jump into the mad world that we live and breathe in, which is pickleball. She's also been dead body number 3 on several Law and Order episodes, and I think waitress number 2 on a Beverly Hills 902 rerun.
Okay.
But out further,
it was the OC. It was the OC.
Oh, it was the OC. I'm so sorry. My bad. Sorry. But yeah, the one and only AJ McCord.
Hello. That was like mostly accurate. We'll go with it. Other than the fact that I'm actually from the, I would say, America's finest city, right? So not the Orange County area, but I'm from San Diego, so really close.
Oh, well, that's perfect, because I think you used to live in San Diego.
I have a 619 area code, 858 area code, and you're like some silly LA area code.
And I came out here to do grad school at San Diego State. That's what brought me out here. Never thought I'd stay. And here I am 31 years later, married with 2 children. What happened? My mother's.
I feel like we should be in Old Town at some Old Town Mexican cafe doing this podcast live.
I know.
Where's the budget for that?
They have not the Yard House, but they have.
You know what? This time next year we're there.
Okay.
Deal.
All right. So AJ, I've never met you. So if we just bumped into one another in the elevator and we had we were in, a tall building that went about 28 floors. So you got some time. And I said, what do you do? Or what are you all about? What's your story? How would you respond? Can you give us a quick recap of kind of who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So I think, first, it's very exciting to be joining you. I will take the first floor to say thank you very much for having me. Now, floors 2 through 28 are mine alone. And I am a storyteller through and through. That is basically what I'm all about when it boils down to it. I really believe that our stories are what bring everybody together. And I grew up an athlete. I grew up a fan of sports. And so for me, I've always found the power of sports storytelling to be what actually brings people into arenas, stadiums, courts, surf lineups around the world, is the power of people's stories bringing us together. And so at the core of who I am, I'm a storyteller. I was raised in a household with very strong women. So my mom and my grandma were actually the ones who introduced me to football. And that was sort of the first time that I saw, sports broadcasting as a career, because I saw women on the sidelines and I went, oh, this is great. And I loved learning the ins and outs from the commentators and analysts in the booth. But what I really, really loved was the person on the sideline telling me about who the person was underneath the jersey, right? I wanted to know who I was rooting for, and not necessarily, this was long before fantasy and all that jazz, when you could have a vested interest in it other than growing up there.
Yeah.
So I never really got from home the idea that women didn't belong in sports, because my mom and my grandma were the ones that taught me. Dad and grandpa knew a little bit, but it was mom and grandma who had the season tickets to the Chargers. It was them who taught me everything that I knew about sort of mainstream sports. I was a gymnast, but I did grow up in San Diego, so I am honored that you believe I was a mermaid. I kind of like to believe that I still am, despite dabbling in the pickleball courts. So I grew up surfing, doing gymnastics, compete in everything under the sun to this day. I still do adult gymnastics, which is highly entertaining and terrible for my back. But yeah, that's the gist of it, I think, in 28 floors.
So tell us a little bit about, obviously got the interest and you started doing it, and then, how hard was it to break into, journalism, it seemingly is you kind of got to be prepared to move around the country and whatever. And have you done that a lot? I read something that you were in Arkansas for a bit.
Yep, I was there. Okay. I think I'm on my 5th state.
Okay.
I graduated college.
Mental state or physical?
Well, we don't, that's too many to count, actually. Physical state, we've gone through the mental state cycle a few times, depending on the job and status of employment. But yeah, so I knew that I wanted to be in sports broadcasting pretty early. I would say from Like I have a distinct memory of watching football at Thanksgiving one year in high school and watching this woman, I think it was Alex Flanagan. I've like gone back and looked at the game and I'm pretty sure it was Alex Flanagan. Doing some commentary on the sidelines and going, you know, if I can't play sports, I want to do that. And I was probably 16 at the time, so that's like way too old to keep the Olympic dream alive for gymnastics. So I knew I wasn't going to compete in anything. And so I decided to switch my focus. So I went to, I started calling games in high school, actually. I would go out to like Bakersfield in California and call high school soccer my senior year, which was really good for my social life. And then I went to Point Loma Nazarene. They have a fantastic broadcast journalism program. And I got everything I could out of that school and that journalism department, some amazing professors there. But really what launched everything for me was the internships that I was able to get. And so my first internship was with Dick Enberg, who's a legend, a grandfather in sports broadcasting. Yeah. And he was with the Padres. It was towards the end of his career. And so he was with the Padres. So I was his right-hand woman and I learned about storytelling from the best in the business and spent all summer with him watching baseball. I was there 3 hours before every game. I was there an hour after a game. I mean, it was, again, great for my social life. But really got some great experience through internships in college and then ended up moving to Colorado. My first job out of college for sports broadcasting was I was a writer and researcher for the Olympic Channel. So leading up to Sochi 2014, I did all of writing, the researching. I handed everything off to Jenny Kavnar was the host of the show. She's amazing, still a good friend of mine. And ironically, she was at the Padres and I was interning there. So there was like some really cool synergy, learned a lot from her. And that was when it really was solidified. I've never really been into makeup, never really been into like getting ready. It's just like not been my thing. So for a while I was like, maybe I don't want to be on TV. Like maybe I was going to ask
you. Yeah, I was going to ask you the difference. Like, do you prefer being on or behind the camera, in front or behind, or you don't kind of mind? I mean, you're gorgeous, so I mean, you should be on.
Really got ready.
Probably shouldn't be doing a podcast, on video, but you absolutely should. So let's just move on from that. But which do you prefer?
Yeah, well, so I definitely prefer being. Well, I guess I'll answer it this way. I'm a control freak. You can blame gymnastics. You can blame the OCD that was developed along the way, whatever it is, but I'm a control freak. And so what I learned in that job was that Jenny is one of the best in the business. And also I had put so much work into making sure that all of these stories, all of these interviews, were set up as well as they possibly could, that it was really hard for me to hand it over and trust someone else to tell the story, because not because they couldn't do it, or I mean, Jenny was like 800 times better than I was at that point in time, still is, right? Like she's one of the best of the best, but it was a control issue for me. And so I've been in therapy about my control issues for years, but turns out in this career is actually pretty good. So I decided to go in front of the camera and I got a lot of reps in there it was Universal Sports, now it's the Olympic Channel, but got a lot of reps in there and then took my very first like full-time on-air job at the ABC affiliate in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I was the weekend sports anchor and reporter. So that's how I got my start.
So you get that opportunity. Do you go, do I want to go to Arkansas, or do you just
hang on? There's like 4 people who love Arkansas.
I know, but I'm just saying,
and they might be
from San Diego,
and now she's gonna get hate mail because of that.
No, I'll get the hate mail. All the hate mail's coming to me. But like, does it go? I mean, because you've got to be prepared in this business to go anywhere, right?
For sure. You have to be prepared. And honestly, I actually was pretty stoked to go to Arkansas, not really I didn't know anything about the state. I'd be lying if I told you I could figure out where it was on a map when I was, in high school, because it's just like somewhere in the middle and we have this West Coast bias that's like, there's no ocean. It's not a state that I tend to want to spend a lot of time in, but it was the SEC. And so for me, covering, with football, especially, and really every sport in the SEC, It quote unquote just means more, as they love to tell you in every commercial. But in Arkansas, it truly did. Like, everybody in Arkansas is a Razorbacks fan. And so for the most part, I mean, that's like a vast generalization, but more than a lot of states, right? There's not a pro team that takes sort of some pull away from the college atmosphere. And so I thoroughly was stoked to go to Arkansas and cover the SEC. I was like, this is my chance. This is big time. And I had a lot of friends who had to go to Fargo, North Dakota, or like the middle of nowhere with no sports, right? Like, nothing against Fargo, North Dakota, for, you know, the 4 people listening who really love it there. I've never been, so it's nothing against Fargo, but not a lot of sports in North Dakota. And so I was trying to figure out, you know, I was very excited because I'd heard the sort of horror stories, if you will, of some of the markets that people have to go to. And for me, it was like, I get to go to a market with a big SEC program. They're middle of the pack in a lot of sports. They had a really good gymnastics team for a while, which I was excited about, or at least some really good gymnasts. And so I was actually pretty excited to get to go.
So you never got sent to like Juneau, Alaska to cover ice fishing?
No, although let me tell you, I think I could have thrived in Juneau for like 6 months of the year, but I am a sunlight person, so I would have really struggled the other 6 months.
But you know what's funny? Like, you mentioned something interesting there, because you're from San Diego, and you know, I always thought the problem with San Diego was that there's too much to do, right? There's too, you know, you've got the Padres, you've got the Chargers. Chargers, you know, we could never draw a crowd. The Aztecs were okay, you know, we had Marshall Faulk for a hot second, and that made a difference, but then he got gypped on the Heisman, and don't get me started on that because I was there. But you know, there's almost too much to do, and the sun's shining, and do we really need to go to the game? And or you go to the place where, you know, your friends got sent, where there's not a lot going on. So to be in a location where, you're right, everybody is cheering for that college football team, I completely get it. Okay, I have one more.
Real quick though, I have to interrupt, because do you think, this is a little bit of a philosophical question, because I'm going to go deep for a minute. I know the caffeine's kicking in. No, like when you go to a state, right, where there's like that, like college sports is everything. Like there's some towns in Texas where football, high school football is everything, or college football becomes everything in the sport. In college, there are times that as a female athlete in college, you have the largest audience ever. And then nothing else you do sporting wise afterwards compares to that. And it's a little bit of a roller coaster when you go, I've been in a stadium with thousands of people cheering my name and my school's name, and I've got my name on my back and the school's logo. And then next week I'm playing here and there's 5 Muppets watching.
Well, so like I said, I grew up being a gymnast. And so I think for me, college always made sense as the ending point for my sport, because women didn't compete in college unless they weren't good enough to go to the Olympics, or they had already been to the Olympics, right? And so in gymnastics, this was before NIL, before they could compete as pros. This when you had to maintain amateur status, all that jazz. And so for me, that always sort of made sense. But I think, I mean, it's one of the reasons I am unashamedly passionate about women's sports, is because there is this dichotomy. And like, as far as we've come, right? Like, I mean, I think about the WNBA finals. It is my personal mission to go watch women's sporting events in bars solely to force them to turn it on. That's it. Because I want regular sports fans to just see women's sports as the norm, right? So I went into this bar, sat down at the bar, me, myself, and I, with like 15 men at the bar. There's 3 TVs on baseball games, none of which are playing in the city that I'm currently in. And I'm like, I would like the WNBA finals on, please and thank you. Bartender goes and turns it on. Next thing you know, friends get there, we move tables. So now I ask for another TV, and then I ask for another. So before I left that night, we'd gone from like 7 TVs on a baseball game that had no bearing on the like local audience to 3 WNBA finals TVs. And it was the crazy game 5 between the Aces and the Liberty. It came down to the final seconds. and people were engaged. Like the ball got tipped out of bounds, or I can't even remember what happened, but something happened and people reacted. And these were people who maybe 20 minutes ago didn't know that there was a basketball game on, right? But like you get drawn in when it's presented as just a sport, and not when we get into this whole thing about like, not when we let the misogyny start talking. But my goal always and forever is to just put women's sports in the same spaces as men's sports. And that is something, especially in women's athletics, especially in college, the pro leagues have not caught up yet. And so it is something that a lot of female athletes have to deal with, whereas male athletes don't necessarily, right? Football, basketball, baseball, it's different. You take the comparison for basketball and baseball, the WNBA is not playing in the same venues yet, right? We had the Aces at the Barclays Center. Attendance was wild. The Aces have a multi-million practice facility, but they're like one of the first in the league to have that, if not the first. And so pro women's sports still have a long way to go, but because we're getting more and more attention, like that's why I'm unashamed about it, Lee, is because exactly what you're saying is there is still a difference, right? Basketball or NBA arenas sell out all the time. I mean, I covered the Portland Trailblazers for 5 years, and there were some not great years in there, and there were always people in the stands. Right. And so, yeah, it's an interesting thing that, especially for female athletes and fans of women's sports, is always something that we have to think about.
Hey, did I also read that a little bit we've got a little bit of a conversational Portuguese in you?
Oh yeah, wow, please don't put me on the spot with that. A little bit.
But I'm just like, why Portuguese?
I've been trying to get in with the World Surf League for years. The San Diegan in me loves surfing. I've followed surfing for a long time. When it became an Olympic sport, nobody was more thrilled. I was so excited to watch these surfers compete. It's one of the first American pro leagues to have the same prize money for men and women. And so they did that in 2018. So I've been about surfing for my whole life, but to get to have something that I love and then also get to call it a job is like always the dream. I get to the US Open, and I quickly realized that outside of English speaking countries, right? We're talking about the States, we're talking about Australia. Brazil is one of the largest contingents of surfing, of professional surfing, whether it's the actual pros or fans of it. And so I started going, there was a few instances where like a surfer would win their heat and they'd be so excited about winning their heat, which is when I would come interview them, but then they'd be nervous about answering questions in English. And I was like, that's not how this should work.
That's not cool.
You did the hard part. The hard part was winning the heat. This should be the fun part. And so I kind of got a little bit compelled to be like, it's my job to make sure that you feel comfortable telling your story however you feel the most comfortable. And I can't learn every language in the world, but I can start with one that has a really large presence in this world that means a lot to me and that I would like to stay in. And so I started learning Portuguese in like August of last year, and I've been pretty diligent with my Duolingo.
We're gonna get onto the pickleball, but do you like pick Simone Jardim? I'm gonna say her last name wrong. Jardim. Do you pick her brains or just try and sidebar with her and say, give me a couple of words, or like?
Yeah, I've had a few sidebar conversations with Simone, and the good and bad thing is that growing up in San Diego, Spanish was around all the time. So I did have a basic understanding of like the grammar is relatively similar between Spanish and Portuguese. So it probably wasn't the hardest language for me to like get the base of, but now we're at the point where like I'm dialing different tenses, and I just did the WSL finals in, I believe that was September, and Felipe Toledo, who's one of the best, he's currently the best surfer in the world for the men. He's back-to-back world title, and he's from Brazil. And so I got, I was able to ask him a question in Portuguese, and then I understood everything that he said back. So it's still very conversational. I'm still very hesitant. I still have I'm sure, a terrible accent, but it's been pretty fun. It's been a great challenge. I love a challenge, and I've always loved language. So having sort of an excuse to focus on learning a language has been such a gift.
That's awesome. Well, Lee, as you know, probably, jabbers away in Spanish all day long, which I don't. I mean, it's so annoying. I did 5 years of French and then I moved here. Not a good
Very useful language. So useful.
Is it though? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, you can pronounce a bottle of wine nicely. That's right.
Exactly.
Very important.
We won't go into that, but anyway, so I am like, I've got 2 languages, English and bad language, that's it. So I'm always impressed by anybody that's bilingual in anything.
Well, I'm not bilingual. We're gonna I am barely conversational, but we're working at it.
I heard this quote. I don't know who said it. I don't know, some Muppet somewhere on a fortune cookie, probably. It said, everyone's got a story, but no one cares about your story until you win. How true do you think that is?
That's depressing.
I think that's my job. I think my job is that if I can convince you that you have more in common with this athlete than you ever could if they become a champion, right? Because if I'm telling you about the athlete, the odds are you're not actually in the running to become a champion. And so, not to undermine the perseverance and everything it takes to be the best of the best, but I think that where we find more in common is much more outside of the success on the field, in the field of play. Like I think about, Sabrina Ionescu and the filthy way that she plays basketball. I'll never be able to play basketball like Sabrina Ionescu, not once ever. She's not a WNBA champ. This was the closest she came, obviously, with the Liberty this past season. But I covered her in college because she was at Oregon as well. And her story is like who she is, and to borrow the phrase that she borrows from Kobe all the time, right, is the Mamba mentality. Like that's something that I can apply as a regular old person to everything that I do, right? Like I could be doing this podcast, I could be doing the other work, the calling the events with the APP, right? Like I can bring the best of myself each and every day, even when I don't feel like it. And that's the relatable part about an athlete before they ever become a champion, is like what they do day in and day out. So yeah, does the story have more glitz and glam and drama and like Hollywood potential when it's this drastic, from the lowest of lows to the highest of highs? Sure. But I think the reality is most of us live in the middle. Most of us have had hard times. We've had great times, but like it's how you survive that middle part that really defines who you are as a person. And so all these people who are either on their way up, on their way down, or somewhere in the middle, that's where we have a lot more in common than we necessarily do with the actual champion, if that makes sense.
The only reason she could ask that intelligent question is she's got new glasses on. Quick plug. What's the story behind the new glasses there, Whitwell?
It's got nothing to do with my intelligence, but they make me look more intelligent. No, these are my new Knockaround readers. My Knockaround are one of my San Diego company that are my sunglass sponsor, and they just came out with readers, so now I can see better and look more intelligent.
Yeah, and then I forgot, I mean, we're idiots. This is the Pickleball podcast, so we probably should ask you how you got into pickleball, commentary before we get into the AP questions, which is where people get their problems solved. So talk about your transition to or introduction to pickleball. Do you play? How did you get into it? What do you like about it? Those types of things.
So I play very casually. I don't know how to say this without making myself sound pretty pathetic. I'm not at home very often, so I don't have like a group of friends at home that I can play with consistently. But it is a pretty common like on the road activity, whether with the pickleball crew or actually a lot of the surf crew really likes to play pickleball as well. When I go back home to San Diego and visit my family, there's pickleball. My aunt and uncle are massively into it in Hawaii. And so I play pickleball casually, but this came along through sort of some network connections with my agent and the APP, and they called and asked if I wanted to give it a shot. And I said, sure, because again, I think going back to sort of what I'm about in this storytelling, sort of freelancing, choosing the projects that I have, is that I love the mainstream sports. It's very fun, but that's not where we need storytellers. We need storytellers in these sports that are trying to make it, in these athletes that are trying to get the new sponsorships, that are trying to have their story be out there. Because if we can tell their story, then that's how these sports grow organically. That's how people fall in love with the athletes and not necessarily just the game, right? And so so I was really intrigued to get a chance to work with the APP. And my first event was Mesa. I had I think I might have still been jet lagged because I had just come back from Portugal, which, Lee, you know, that time difference, pretty brutal.
It's fun, isn't it?
It's super fun. It was a really good time for me. And so I was in a new role, new co-commentators who helped me along as much as they could. But that was not I would say that that was a time when I like really had to look myself in the mirror and go, whoa, it has been a minute since I've struggled this much in a first outing, because I am a perfectionist. I am OCD. I have all these things going for me to where I rarely, which like maybe this is, you know, I don't know. I rarely do things that I don't think I can succeed at. And like that I don't feel like I've got a basis for already succeeding, if that makes sense. And pickleball was one of those that I had no foundation. I had no reason to believe I could do this. I was doing play-by-play, which is a newer sort of vein of sports broadcasting for me. And then I was doing a sport and a league that I had never covered, had not gotten a chance to watch. And it was very humbling. My first time out, I was like, man, I think that was terrible. And I think it was like probably middle, but it felt terrible to me.
It was probably like, just fine, but it's fast.
I don't know, Lee, you can go ahead and jump in here if you it was not
I do remember
ideal.
And that was the first event I've ever had to pull out of because I got terrible food poisoning. So I couldn't play women's doubles. I was sick in mixed doubles. I was like, I couldn't see the ball. I was like, what is going on with me? I feel like I went out last night and like, you know, closed the bar down, but I know I didn't because I was in bed by 9. And you know,
do we believe her?
No, but like
she owns when she closes bars.
I know. I was so sick and I was like, I can't play, and I felt so bad. So I got to listen a lot.
Oh.
You know, at first I'm like, who is this Muppet? Like, yeah, who's this new Muppet the APP has? And then I was like, oh, okay, this is good personality. And you know, and it was like, okay, obviously pickleball's not your first sport,
right?
I don't think it was anyone's first sport.
No, I was gonna say,
it's not even a professional first sport.
And but no, as it went on, you got more and more comfortable.
Yes.
And you settled in. Like it wasn't the cadence got better and everything was just, and it started flowing. And it's like, and then because I didn't meet you in Mesa.
Sacramento.
No, I met you in Sacramento. That's and then I was like, okay, that's a face behind, that's the person behind the commentating. And it was like, you know, you were really cool. And everything, I think with every event you get more and more confident. And now it's just like, oh man, look, Lee missed another third. Well done, Lee. You know, I don't appreciate it.
I think you're mixing me up with Chad. I think he's the one who calls out stuff like that, but
rubbing off on you.
They do. I tried my best to keep them in line, but yeah, so I tried it and it was, like I said, it was really good for me to try something new that I really did not have a foundation in. And there was that moment where, again, this is like we're talking about in the middle, right? Like we're talking about that moment where you go, okay, that was not great. I didn't love that. I think I can do better. Like I didn't even know if I could do better than that at that point. It was just like, everything about this was new. But I remember the Monday after Mesa, looking at, like, sort of just reflecting on the weekend and thinking back and going, well, you got two choices here, McCord. You can decide that you're going to get better at this, or you can decide that this is not for you, and this is not what you want to get better at, and this is not where you want to put your time. And both of these are fine, but you have a choice here. And there was enough in that Mesa tournament to be like, no, I do believe in this. I do believe in these athletes. I had listened to previous broadcasts. I'd listened to other pickleball broadcasts, and I was like, no one is telling the story of who these athletes are. And maybe I don't know pickleball as well as the next person, but I know I can tell these athletes stories. And at the end of the day, that is what I'm in it for. And if they believe in me enough, they being the APP, right? Like if they believe in me enough to trust me with their stories, and the athletes who have been amazing from the second that I walked onto the court, right? Like from the very first car wash in Mesa, have been amazing and welcoming and everything. If they can trust me with their stories, then like I owe them to do my best at it, and to be better, and to decide I can do this better than I just did. And so that's been my goal. I'm far from perfect. I'm still learning everything about pickleball as it's coming up. I'm still trying to convince Chad and Dom that we have the ability to like make up names in pickleball, which I'm still working on. But I know that I get better every single weekend. And I know now, like you're saying, Lee, like I know how to tell players stories in the middle of a match. And at the end of the day, if I can do that, Chad and Dom have the pickleball analysis. Yeah. So like, let me lean into this more. And once I realized I didn't have to do everything and be everything and it was great, and it's been great. And so that's how I got into pickleball, and
she's the Vince Scully of pickleball. She's just telling
and you know what, we are so thankful to have her, honestly.
Yeah,
because you do bring a lot to the tour, and that's I haven't been paid to say that.
All right, you two.
That was from the heart.
It's time for Dear AP. Okay, question number 1 for Dear AP is from, interestingly, our fun intern Jack. So we have intern Jack, and I was talking to intern Jack the other day, and we were sort of ruminating over the fact that it's sort of in tennis, it's frowned upon to hit the ball really at somebody. And I said, well, yeah, but you never played college tennis like me and Lee, so that rule goes out the window in college tennis. You can totally tube people and it's fine. But he said, you know, his question for you two was, is it wrong or unethical to hit the ball at people purposefully a lot in pickleball? Is it an unwritten rule? And should I be concerned that I like it?
So, okay, that's a 2-part question.
Yeah.
First part is, in rec, don't do that. Don't be that person.
Okay.
Like, what's on the line? Are we playing for money? Are we playing for bragging rights? A $2 medal, ESPN highlight reel, you know, a shout out from AJ saying that's the 5th time Jack has body bagged 75-year-old Betty and won the point, right? Here's the thing: on the tennis court, you can hit passing shots. The court is big. 2 people cannot, arms width apart, cannot cover the whole court.
Yeah.
In pickleball, you can stand, especially with some of the giants that are playing pickleball right now. You know, you got 6'5", 6'6" guys covering the court, and then, you know, me at 5'7", I've got to cover 30% of the court. We've got the court covered.
Yeah.
So you can't really hit passing shots. So you're trying to jam people up, right? You're not trying to hit them in the chest, but you're trying to get them to lean back or to chicken wing or to do something, right? So it is an accepted practice, and he should like it, because if he does like it, he'll get better at it and get better at targeting the body. You've got to look at the body like almost like you're at the firing range and you've got different targets. You're like, where am I hitting this? Where am I hitting that? If I get this ball, where can I hit it? You know, so that's a tactical side of things. You're not trying to knock somebody out, take their eyes out, make their false teeth go flying. You know, none of that. You know, but occasionally, if you make somebody crap their pants, you did your job.
Well, and I think the funny, or I don't know about the way that it's made socially acceptable, right? Especially in the pros, is like, if you go ahead and hit somebody center mass and they get jammed up or whatever goes off their shoulder, just hold up the hand. Oh, so sorry. Right.
Yeah,
like
you're not sorry.
That's exactly. But it's the socially acceptable. Like, I didn't really mean to hit you. Like, I meant to hit you, just not hurt you.
Yeah.
Right. Or you know what, your partner popped up the ball, get mad at them.
Yeah.
Or maybe your paddle shouldn't be down by your shoelaces and it should be ready.
Any of the above options.
Sorry.
I think he
Sorry
needs
you weren't ready for that.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
hit, but I don't hurt. It should
Yes.
be something like that. Like you just coined a phrase there, AJ. It's hit, don't hurt. Okay. Question number 2. Very good. And actually, kind of good that you were talking about targeting, Lee, because that plays into this next question from Tiffany in Santa Monica. And Tiffany from Santa Monica writes and says, oh, by the way, Santa Monica is a hotbed of pickleball play. She said, when is the right time to throw up an offensive lob? Is there a better location on the court to play the lob to? So I think her point being, she wants to change it up. She wants to throw up a lob. What's the right time to do it? And in doing so, and you're going to say, well, it depends, because that's what Lee says every time to every question I ask her.
I'm just trying to get a Depends sponsorship, so I keep saying
She is.
Depends.
She's literally trying to get it's all about the Depends sponsorship. But is there a better location? Is it better to put it in the middle of the court?
Like closest to the back of the court is probably the best location
yes.
for a lob.
But
Like
I mean,
not in front of the person, like behind them. Preferably behind them where they have to run backwards. Like no,
in front. To deal with
great lob, but it got in front of them. It's fine. That's an
Okay.
overhead. When's the best time to lob offensively? When you see your opponent leaning in and you can snag that ball out of the air and push it over their head, right?
So
when you brought them on a short dink and they're running forward, their momentum's bringing them forward, and you're like, well, do I keep bringing you forward, or should I just now make you turn and go backwards, and you make them go backwards? You know, it's one of those things. People tend to overdo the lob a lot, so then it gets predictable, and then so all of a sudden you're like, oh, why am I eating that ball? We lobbed 25 times in 3 points. Hello, they're cottoning on. But no, the lob used effectively and offensively or defensively, so long as it's executed correctly, is a great strategic shot. And I think we're going to see more and more of it as the game gets, especially in the dink game, when people are leaning in a lot and the body weight is forward. You can catch somebody going, well, they dinked 7 times, you know, to my backhand. Obviously, they're going to dink again. So you prepare it. You know, you'll get players sort of preparing a little bit early and dropping down, and that's when you catch that. Then you can throw up the lob. Over their backhand is always a good rule of thumb, and behind them to the back of
unless it's mine, because I have a wicked backhand.
I've seen your tricep. That backhand's not going to hurt.
Oh, whatever. All right. Anything to add, AJ, on that one? Otherwise, we're gonna no. Okay.
Oh,
now we're gonna jump into the fun.
AJ's like, I'm going to lob Doris on the court next time.
yeah.